Hello everybody, welcome to Omargani MES College Online Learning Hub. Today I will discuss chapter 6 to 14 Poetics by Aristotle. The objectives of today's discussions are to provide a critical overview of the concept of tragedy by Aristotle. By attending today's session, students will have clear conceptions of Aristotle's view on literary criticism with reference to the term of tragedy. I will analyze all the chapters starting with chapter 6 that defines the term tragedy. Chapter 7 discusses the scope of the plot. Chapter 8 discusses unity of the plot. Chapter 9 discusses poetic truth and historical truth. Chapter 10 discusses simple and complex plot. Chapter 11 discusses reversal, discovery and calamity. And chapter 12 points the main parts of the tragedy. Chapter 13 discusses the tragic actions and chapter 14 discusses fear and pity. In chapter 6, Aristotle gives a broader definition of tragedy. This definition is known as the formal one. Tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. The language is embellished with all kinds of artistic ornaments. There are several parts in the tragedy, and that enact the human action. Ultimately, it is able to purge the pity and fear of the audience. He discusses the part and or the elements of the tragedy that include plot, character, diction, thought, a spectacle, and song. But the most important thing in tragedy is its structures of the incidents. For tragedy is an imitation not of man but of an action and life. And the life consists of actions, the dramatic actions. Most important emotional interest lies in tragedy. Plot, he says, is the soul of tragedy that needs a proper structuring. Plot should be whole and have organic unity. It should abide by probability and necessity. Character should be consistent, good, appropriate, and true to life. Diction is the choice of words and image in a literary composition. Aristotle listed 6 types of words. Thought is the faculty of saying what is possible and pertinent in given circumstances. It is employed for the production of emotional effect. A spectacle is the mode of imitation by which the story is presented on a stage before the audience. It is the sight of a disaster. It can raise pity and fear in the spectators. Songs are pleasurable additions to a play. In a tragedy, songs are provided by the chorus. In chapter 7, there should be a definite beginning, the middle, and the ending of the plot. It should be so because the beauty depends on magnitude and order. A certain length that is memorable is needed. The sequences of the event should happen according to the law of probability or the necessity. It should always admit a change from good to bad or vice versa, and thus he stresses the unity of action. Aristotle now discusses the unity of the actions in chapter 8. All the events and the actions that are there in the tragedy should be interrelated. They should create the organic whole. For a thing whose presence and absence makes no visible differences is not an organic part of the whole. His chapter 9 is oriented towards revealing the function of the writers. The writers are expected to include not what had happened, but what may happen according to the law of probability. From this point, Aristotle says that poetry is more philosophical and higher than history, for poetry tends to express the universal while history the particular. The poet is the creator and the maker more of the plot than of the verse, since he is a poet because he imitates, and the imitation is always of the actions. If the surprise is used, it heightens the effect. In chapter 10, Aristotle classifies the plot, which can be of 2 types. One is simple and the other is the complex. Simple plot includes less reversal and therefore the least amount of the surprise, while the complex plot is accompanied by reversals. The same conception discussed in the 10th chapter is further described in chapter 11. The reversal of the situation is a change by which the action veers round to its opposite. He names it peripecia and says that it is caused by a kind of recognition, that is, discovery or anagnosis. There are 5 types of recognitions, such as signs and objects. Author tells himself discovery from memory, process of reasoning, and discovery arise out of false memory. This recognition, like in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, should be from the ignorance to knowledge. It helps writer lead his audience to the pity and fear. The scenes of sufferings are needed, but the on-stage violence is harmful. So the scene of suffering and violence should happen off stage and are to be narrated, such as the suicide of Jocasta and the self-torture of Oedipus happen off stage and are narrated in the play. Chapter 12 discusses about the 6 elements of tragedy: prologue, epilogue, exort, choric song, parody, and stasimon. The latter 2 are treated inclusively under song. Thus, only 4 elements. Prologue is the first narration that establishes a mood for the dramatic discourse. Epilogue relates what happens when the last scene of the tragedy takes over. Exort is related to the what follows the last choric song. Parody is the first whole statement of the chorus, and the stasimon, the song sung by chorus without trochee and anapest. Choric song include both stasimon and parody. Chapter 13 discusses about tragedy, which aims at bringing catharsis on the side of the audience. Therefore, a perfect tragedy has a complex plan, like in Oedipus Rex. It demands a single plot. The change of fortune should be from good to bad due to error or frailty. Tragic action do not show prosperous men losing fortune, poor men gaining fortune, enemy contest with enemy. There are 4 possible variations of tragic action: action not done; 2. Action done with or without full knowing; 3. Knowing too late; knowing and stopping. In chapter 14, Aristotle discusses pity and fear. The question Aristotle focuses on, however, is how fear and pity are most effectively aroused. He suggests that the tragic hero ought to be neither too good nor too bad, but rather intermediate, much like us. We should be able to see in the hero a better version of ourselves. Our pity and fear will be aroused by the realization that if a better person than us can be made to suffer for his or her shortcomings, then we too may suffer for ours. He also defines catharsis. It is the kind of effect tragedy brings on the audience. Catharsis is a Greek word that means purgation in English. He gives these definitions in chapter 7 also. A bulk of interpretation is devoted to elucidate what Aristotle meant by this term. The sentence appears in his Poetics as tragedy through pity and fear affects a purgation of such emotions. It seems that it is a therapeutic effect that is equivalent to a sense of release from the tension that comes after the storm and climax. According to Aristotle, the end of poetry is to give pleasure, and tragedy has its own pleasure beside. Proper aesthetic pleasure can be possible only when the requirements of morality is satisfied. This is the end of our second session. In our next sessions, we will discuss chapter 24 and 26 and all the Greek terms used by Aristotle. Thank you for being with us.